John Gallagher is my special guest today on the Getting the Deal Done podcast. I'm John Martinka, and today we're going to talk about people and how important they are to every business. And in my world, M&A, when companies want to exit with style, grace, and more money, it always comes down to the people at different levels. So, welcome, John.
Hey, John, I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and your listeners.
Yeah. Start by telling us a little bit about you, where you come from, how you got to be where you are as an executive and performance coach.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. And I won't go back all the way through outside of, letting you know that I was an engineer to get started, mechanical engineer, went WVU grad. But real quickly, I got into the industry and the manufacturing industry and learned that I didn't like doing a whole lot of engineering work, but that people I enjoyed working with in the groups that I had. And it actually got me an opportunity for leadership early on in my career to lead a group of about 200 people at a distribution center in Roanoke, Virginia. And the primary reason for that really was my ability to connect with those individuals. I frankly didn't know how to spell leadership when I got started there. But the other side that really came through was two things. One is I had a mentor who invested in me. He brought me a book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and we walked through every chapter of that, one chapter a week, and just talked about leadership. That was life changing for me. And I've now read that book three times and I've given it away. I don't know how many times. But the second was early on in my career and looking at operational efficiency. I thought I had it as an engineer. I'm like, I don't need to be told anything to do. I know how to get this stuff done. And they brought a group of consultants in one time with this methodology called lean or Kaizen. And I said, all right, let's get through this week and we'll get through it. And then we'll go back to the way we were before after these consultants leave. And I got to tell you, a totally different breakthrough occurred for me through that week. I was hooked when they started to teach the technique of the Toyota production system and the steps that were involved. And that was something that started for me in 1998. And I've been a student of both leadership and lean over the last 25 years to grow through my journey. I've worked in manufacturing systems as a leader. I've been in real estate and construction, rode that down to the bottom in 2009 when that occurred. And then ultimately, when I looked to get back into operations, I had guys that I worked with before who knew of my skill set in lean and leadership, and they said, "Why don't you do this consulting thing?" I said, I have no desire to do that. I really don't. I don't like to travel." And they called me three different times, and the third time they said, "Well, we want you to help us in healthcare, hospitals and clinics, and helping them to improve the flow of patients through those facilities." And something triggered inside me says that sounds like something I could be naive enough to believe I can make an impact. So I can do that for a couple of years and get into operations. That was 15 years ago, 10 years with a consulting company, ultimately purchased twice, ending up in the hands of IBM. And I left IBM in 2020 and started my own organization, Growing Champions, that does executive coaching and consulting, utilizing lean and some of those coaching techniques that I've learned over the years to inspire, encourage, and equip leaders ultimately to reach a level of potential that they were called to be. So that's how we end up on a conversation today, John. Hopefully, I didn't go too far and too
No,
long with
that's a
that.
great story. You talk about the Kaizen and the lean. I've got some past clients who are they here in the Seattle area. They came out of operations with a company called Fluke, and
Sure.
Fluke is at the time was owned by Danaher, and I'll tell you they are at the cream of the crop. But everyone I've met that worked at Danaher was great at operations, and these
My teachers were both from Danaher. They were the generation before who were taught by the Japanese, and I got to tell you, they were the Danaher guys that came over. Moffett Enterprises who was our consultant to start out with, but Mark DeLuzio and George Koenigsegger all been influences on me. They're great, knowledgeable guys.
well these two guys have bought quite a number of companies, have grown it and using that as their platform every time they get one is to get in that Kaizen and lean and all of that.
Yeah, what I love about that, you talk about your clients, is that, I mean, ultimately we teach, and I continue to teach today, that lean is a growth strategy. It's not a cost cutting strategy. It's not a productivity or an efficiency improvement strategy. Although you review and receive all those things, it really is about how do we grow and leverage the people that we have. And leverage people sounds like a strong term, but the ability of the people that we have, remove the waste from what they're doing on a daily basis, ultimately allowing them to do more. with the same amount of resources that they have.
Well, everyone's looking for growth strategies, and it sounds like some lean is something that people like you can help them with to grow, not just to save money. Now, let's talk about the line that really got my attention when we talked a few weeks ago was excellence only happens on purpose. That's a great
Yeah,
line.
I like that, John, and I wish I could say that I made it up completely on my own, but I'll tell you a story behind how that all got started. I mean, as a leader excuse me, as a reader of many leadership books, I like little quotes and little pithy statements that you can easily remember and ultimately make an impact. And I was scrolling through Instagram one day and came across the post of the president of Liberty University, Jerry Prevost, and he had a quote on there that said, "Excellence only happens on purpose." But what caught my eye a little bit was actually in the background was the picture of a cheerleader for the Liberty University football team running one of those huge flags down the football field. And that photo that was in his post actually ended up being my son. And so that was in that picture. And I thought about that as like there's only a few individuals that would be able to carry that flag that he would carry 120 yards down that football field and do it without dropping it. And there's a lot of training that went into what he did, a lot of exercise, a lot of nutrition that he had to do to reach that level. And so when you think about that, excellence only happens on purpose. It doesn't happen through a willy-nilly day that you have. You've got to be very intentional with your disciplines daily, weekly, and monthly, and repeat those over and over again consistently to be successful. The other side of excellence is I think that on the good side of that is perfection. Vince Lombardi, the great football coach of the Green Bay Packers for a long time ago, he said, if you strive for perfection on a daily basis and you do the things you need to do, you'll ultimately reach excellence in your work. You may never reach perfection, but you will reach excellence. So those are a couple stories, certainly sports stories that drive me there. And I just think it's something that's been pretty profound in the work that I do as well.
Yeah. So tell us how you use that when you're working with the client.
Yeah, when you think about it right off the start, I mean the 7-step methodology that I teach either in my coaching methodology or in the organizational change methodology that was taught via the Toyota production system is that to start off, the individual leader who's looking to make a change has got to make a decision. They've got to decide that ultimately the displeasure of remaining where they are at that point in time, which might be pretty good, but that mediocrity or knowing they can do more has got to be greater. That displeasure has got to be greater than the discomfort of the change itself. And when I think about that, is that sometimes organizations will settle for their performance. Underperformance is one of the key things, even inside the merger and acquisition business, that afford people the opportunity to buy companies that are underperforming. And that if these leaders aren't striving to be excellent on a daily basis and not implementing the daily, weekly, monthly structures and processes that they need to continuously improve their performance, they're not going to get there and they're going to get stuck. But what they also don't realize that on purpose side is that they've got to change the way they do things today. They've got to be more intentional with the relationships that they build with their employees. They've got to be more intentional with their own development, where they're growing in both their personal health and personal life, as well as in their business knowledge and acumen to get there. And so that's how I start them, is that you've got to make that choice. And if you're ready to, in essence, experience the discomfort of the change that's going to be, that I think they're really ready to strive for excellence. I often talk about it as something very simple as crossing your arms. We've done that for so many years, and we realize which arm that we cross over top all the time as a natural. All the simple act of trying to recognize and put your other arm on top when you fold your arms is very uncomfortable. And that discomfort is like, no, I'm going to go back to the old way, the way I did things. And that will get you the results that you've always gotten. So they've got to be ready to take, in essence, the pain, just like an athletic trainer takes you through pain to get you in better physical shape. An executive coach or a consultant needs to be given the freedom to put you through a little bit of discomfort to get you where you need to go.
Okay. So before we get to your 7-step problem solving process, your 7 Ds. Uh, let's go on what you just talked about. So I work in the, the lower middle market. Clients are going to be owners, often founders of a business. They're doing well. They're making money. That's time. They want to think about exiting, and all this that you're talking about. The biggest issue is, and this is not just my thoughts. I have had many guests, and I've been a guest on podcasts where the subject of owner dependency comes up. And I
Oh,
don't care if the business is doing 5 million in sales or 50 million in sales. I like to mention I was at an industry event about a year ago, and a seller of they sold the company for $70 million, two owners. And he said, we realized in the due diligence process, we were way too important to the day to day.
mm.
So how do you get an owner to step back, to do what you're talking about and say, I need to let other people do it? That's a really tough one.
Oof. John, I wish I had the secret sauce because I'm working with two clients right now exactly with the position that you're talking about, that they may be thinking about selling in the future. And look, generationally, there's a gentleman that I talked to is at this, I forget the exact term that he uses, but there's so many of these businesses that are just like that, from 5 million to 100 million, where the owners have bootstrapped the organizations. They are preparing to get out of the business and they've got nobody behind them to get ready to go because they have not been able to develop the people. So I talk about it in the form of really four steps. Take the seven D's out of it for a second, but it's a journey that they go on. The first realization is that they've got to continue to develop themselves. They've got to realize that they are part of the problem. And when you get them to realize that they are part of the problem, then you can get them to start thinking about, okay, what do I need to do to change? Because the second step then is to your point, now I've got to develop my team. And I've spent so many years as a bootstrap owner just telling them what to do, okay, that I don't have anybody that can really stand on their own when I leave the organization. So if I can teach those that report to me, those that are on my team, the leadership skills they need to lead a business, obviously when somebody comes in to buy them, that's something that they're looking for. What is that leadership team doing to have an impact, or is it only that owner? Once you're committed to developing the leaders, the third step there now I can really look at is implementing the structures and processes. Now we can start looking at how do we do our business today? What's the best way we know how to do it today? So many times I'll go and we'll have, 20 or 30 projects going on with these 5 to $50 million companies. You go out to take a look at the projects, and here's what I find out. Once I look at one project in your organization, I've seen one project. I can't find consistency in systems and processes across those 30 processes or those 30 projects. So you've got to do better at codifying the system that you use so that you can have a better chance at scaling that when the organization comes in. Now, once you have those three things in place, developing yourself and recognizing that you need to change, developing your team and providing them the opportunities to win, and implementing the structures and processes, you then have the ability, whether you're a buyer or whether you're an owner that just wants to continuously improve, to have sustainable impact in your business. And you don't go through these ebbs and flows of having a good year and a bad year and not being able to figure out why, but it's on a continuous growth curve. Too many times these organizations try to put systems in place and they make improvements, but they don't put that standard work, that new methodology, and train their individuals. And the ball just rolls right back down the hill again to where they started and they got to start all over. It's so challenging for them. And again, the mindset of a bootstrap owner, God bless them. They have been successful for a long time, and it is hard. It's simple, but it's difficult to get through in terms of delegating some of that work, deselecting some of the tasks and activities that they've been doing for a long time, and ultimately creating the leaders they need in their business.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think about a past client who did everyone in the company pretty much said, we're bogged down because every decision has to be done at his desk. And and when he we I helped him fix the problem and he quintupled his profits and took more vacation. So
And took more
let
vacation, right?
yeah.
Worked fewer hours and made more money.
Yeah. Let's get into your 7 Ds and 7 steps and Although that
Yeah, so I mean, I'll
7 Ds are
just kind of
probably
run
this.
through it kind of quick, and then we'll touch on some that may get there. And again, this
Yeah.
is a lot of what I was taught in the Toyota production system in terms of manufacturing operations, but I know that this methodology works in any environment. I've utilized it in real estate. I've utilized it in construction. I've utilized it in healthcare systems in terms of how I've taught it, but I've also utilized it in churches that I've attended and teaching them this methodology. And those 7 Ds, I just try to be a little bit cute so they're easy to remember. But again, that first one is that decision. You got to make a decision that you're ready to change. Ultimately, you do a dashboard then is how do I measure the effect of what I'm doing inside of the business? How do I know that I'm winning? So it's developing smart objectives and creating the dashboard to know whether you're winning or losing. And frankly, being able to tell from 5 feet in 5 seconds, red or green, am I on track or not on track? Once I have that dashboard, then I can create a true diagnostic. What is it that's going well inside of my business? That's the step three, or what's not going so well, and understand where the gaps are that are keeping me from getting where I want to go. Fourth step is I can now design a solution. I can generate hypotheses that allow me to look at ideas to improve and reach the goals that I've set. And then that next step in terms of design is to deploy it. It's to utilize the disciplines on a daily, weekly basis to run that design and be rigorous in how I do that. And that's where I see a lot of organizations, especially in this small, privately held, they're really good at the ideation process. They're really poor at the execution side of making those things happen and keeping those things in place. And so the step that I add at the end after execution is to dwell on a periodic basis. You must reflect and say what's going well and what could be going better. Ultimately, identifying the things you need to keep doing, start doing, and stop doing. And then that last step is step seven. You won't be surprised it becomes a cycle, is to do it again. Once you think you're done, you've really just begun in terms of how those activities are done. So I got to go back to the start again. Am I willing to take my goals and set them at another level with regards to stretch, take me outside of my comfort zone again, and run through that cycle and over? And when you start to think about your leadership development, your organization development, your business development through the lens of those 7 steps and repeat that cycle over and over again, you can teach it, you can scale it, and bring it through to all employees.
Great. So of those 7 steps, we got a little bit of time left here.
Yeah.
What are a couple that you can, give a little more in-depth explanation in just a few minutes?
Yeah, let's talk about that discipline, that execution side. Because again, I think, especially your listeners, I think this is where there's a big gap. It starts off with underperformance in terms of their business, but ultimately it gets lost in the distractions of what's happening. There's so many different things going on. And you can do anything you want, you just can't do everything you want. So these disciplines, I think about it like this, because I think there are very few owners. Good intention without good discipline will lead to excuses. Back to my original quote that we talk about, good discipline with good intention leads to excellence. And that's the piece that they're missing. So I train these leaders ultimately to identify what are those daily, weekly, monthly tasks that they need to do to ensure success inside of their organization. Then how do they put those on their calendar and become very intentional in making those things happen? Those disciplines are in the form of governance, such as I need to do one-on-ones with my direct reports. Those are governance items in terms of I need to walk the office or walk the area and see how everybody's doing and check in with them. But those disciplines are also when am I intentionally looking at the industry and what's happening in the marketplace and how I'm doing with my competition and coming back and feeding that information back in. Too often people think that structure is going to be holding me back when really it frees them to do exactly what you talked about. Take more time off, make more money, and ultimately see that again in the future. And when they realize how important those disciplines are, I think that excellence is definitely achievable. So that's a step that I know that they use that's really important. And again, um, realizing our time is constrained here, I think one of the ones that I really work with the executives, especially, is on
Yeah.
the front end, is on that decision. And I talk about a framework with them. It's so what, now what, and so that. So, what is the opportunity you're really looking to do? It might be that you're trying to increase the value of your organization to sell it. It might be that you want to make bigger impact in your community. It might be that you want to satisfy and create an environment for your employees that's great for generations to come. ultimately that's identifying what the opportunity is. But the now what is, that's the part that's challenging is I must change. What's the action I must take? I must improve. I must change as a leader. And frankly, lastly, it's that so that. That's the purpose. That's the inspiration that gets you out of bed every morning without hitting the snooze button. That gets you into the office every day on a daily basis, not dreading your work. That says the reason I truly want to do this is to impact and change the world when I think about it. I often think about this in the form of leadership as the greatest story ever told. And when someone is sitting in a room and they ask your leaders or your team or your family or your friends, give me the name of 5 individuals who have made a positive impact on your life. And when someone writes your name on their list, and you may never know it, to me, that's the greatest story ever told as a leader, is now you're leaving a legacy. You're making a difference in the lives of others and a change in the world as well. That decision up front has got to be that clear to inspire people to continue to go.
No, great explanation. Uh, I recall, our previous discussion, uh, you talked about you help the person develop themselves, then you help develop their team, then you help develop the processes because
Hmm.
it has to come from the top, and the top has to do it, not just say it.
Right. They
So,
have to model. I mean, that's one of the most important behaviors. I mean, again, now we can get into little quips, but it's not, when you teach it, people are going to catch it by watching your behaviors. If you give lip service to what the vision is, yet you don't follow what you say, you're going to get limited results from that team that you develop them. So you've got to show that you're ready from a personal development standpoint. What are the books that you're reading, the podcasts you're listening to, just like this one, to grow your business acumen, to understand how you need to grow as a leader? And then what are you sharing with others to say, hey, I learned this story, made it pretty powerful. I think it will be able to help you. Those are the first 2 steps because you can put all the structures and processes in place that you want to. To your point, if the leader's not bought into it, they won't see it as important. They're like, once that guy leaves, once the old man goes away, the owner of the company, we'll just do it the way we want to do it. You have to be, you will get what you tolerate inside of the business, but the best structures in the world without great leaders is just going to fall apart, not be scalable.
yeah, what I'm hearing from that, John, is that when you get the employees to say, "Oh, we'll do it our way," when he or she isn't here, we want to get to the point where our way is the same way the owner has been doing it. So they're bought
Absolutely.
in.
Yeah, they're bought into it, and they'll buy you into you as the leader, right? Before they buy into the vision of the organization, before they buy into the process, they've got to see that you are a leader who's of integrity and make that happen. Absolutely.
I'm gonna make a quick comments little example here, and I'm gonna ask you to finish up with anything you want
Sure.
to end with. I'm very active in my Rotary Club, and I do a project overseas every year in Antigua and Barbuda. We go in the spring. We we donate thousands of computers. We take students who set up Wi-Fi networks. And when you get a grant with Rotary International, there are 2 words that really tie into what we're talking about. You do not get approved if you cannot show training and sustainability. You're talking about training, and the goal is sustaining those results and that growth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hit me as we were talking that that's exactly what Rotary wants to do on projects is training and sustainability. So
Absolutely. So you're talking about, again, of those 4 items, right? It's that I call it stick two. It's training your team members to be successful and that the outcome is that sustainability. If you show that, the variation in your results are all over the place, again, Rotary's one, merger and acquisition is another thing. The value of the organization, when you can't show sustainable growth inside an organization, you're not going to get as much out of that as you want to do that. I think about one of the things that's challenging in terms of that training as well, especially for leaders who have bootstrapped and started on their own and now they have a team. And that's the ability to communicate and give good feedback. You talk about kind of last word. One of the things that really has been on my mind lately with regards to some of these leaders that I work with in this space is the difference in being able to deliver truth in feedback with grace in terms of knowing that they care, that you care about them as the leader. Because if you deliver grace you care about them as a leader without truth, they're gonna run all over you, and they're not going to improve at the rate you need them to improve. If you deliver truth without grace, they don't see that you care about them. You're just a bully, okay, in terms of making that happen. But when you can deliver true feedback with grace that you care about them, that's when you get an organization to buy into it. And I think it's something that's really been there for me because so many times we have trouble giving feedback. And as owners, we've brought people into our businesses for so many years, and they're our friends and they're close to us, and we can't handle giving them the truth that they need, that they're not performing at the level they need to perform because we don't want them to be angry with us. So we end up just with grace and being nice to them, say, hey, come on, let's go. And ultimately, we end up stalling or laying in mediocrity because we're not holding them accountable, holding them high to what they're capable of as well. So it's something I've been thinking about a bunch in
Yeah,
that
I
world.
can think of a few owners and CEOs who fit that
Yeah.
box perfectly. So, John, as we wrap up, tell the listeners how they can get hold of you and any of your intellectual property and all of that.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the opportunity again, John, to be on your podcast. Certainly, it takes time, and I hope the listeners have found some value out of that. If they want to learn more about me, they can find me on social media, but the easiest place to get started is at my website, coachjohngallagher.com. And look, if they're interested in learning any more about these 7 steps that we talked about or how they can ultimately improve the value of their organization, I've got a button on there that they can set up a free call. And if they just mention the podcast name, John, or put your name, John Martinka, in the subject line, I'll be sure to set that up for your listeners as a free call for them, 30-minute call to see how they're doing and what's on their mind.
Great. Thank you. This is the Getting the Deal Done podcast and wonderful information from John Gallagher, an executive and performance coach who, as I understand it, John, you get results.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.